Are you worn out? Are you discouraged? Do you feel like you don't have what it takes to continue in ministry? Do you feel like your way isn't working? We'll talk about it today.
This is the definitive podcast for helping you plan, create, and execute dynamic worship experiences at your church. Useful, practical content in the areas of production, worship, communications, first impressions, and more. This is Making Sunday Happen.
Hey friends, welcome to the podcast. If you're watching me on YouTube, be sure to subscribe to our channel if you would. Hit that notification bell so that all episodes show up directly in your feed so that you never miss one. And feel free to jump back as we just completed a 4-part series on how to use ChatGPT and AI tools for ministry. We had on Alex Lyons from the South Carolina Baptist Convention, also Ryan Frank, Kenny Jahng, and Dustin Stout on a bonus episode talking about how to use his new product, Magai, that gives superpowers to the ChatGPT interface. All that is available in the feed at makingsundayhappen.com or on our YouTube channel, as I talked about. Be sure to check that out. Well, today I welcome pastor and author Kyle Idleman. Kyle is the lead pastor at Southeast Christian Church and is the author of the new book, When Your Way Isn't Working. This book is about equipping you to discover connection to God, not production for God. We're going to be talking about how to find greater rest, depth, and connection, how you can embrace freedom from the pressures of performance and production. Can I get an amen from you, ministry leaders? To make Sunday happen at your church, it takes a toll, and we're going to talk about how to get unstuck if you are hitting a wall. All that and more with Kyle Idleman is coming up. Hey friends, I wanted to let you know about an event coming up from my friends at Tithely. They are having their Tithely Next event on June 21st at 10 a.m. Pacific time. You'll have the opportunity to win an all-expense-paid golf trip to Torrey Pines in California with Dean and Frank from the Tithely team. Plus, the team will announce some exciting product updates and improvements, and they will bless churches with some awesome prizes. Get this, at Next, they're giving away $500 Amazon gift cards, an Apple iPad, that all-expense-paid golf trip to Torrey Pines in California, all-expense pastor's getaway to Nashville with Teamness, and more. You can register for free for a chance to win all of those prizes and more. Just go to tithelynext.com. That's tithelynext.com. Hey guys, today I welcome Kyle Idleman. Kyle is the senior pastor of Southeast Christian Church and the author of the new book, When Your Way Isn't Working. Kyle, I've read this book. I did a lot of kind of prep for our time together. Man, great book. I really love the angle on it. Tell me a little bit before we kind of jump in there. Tell me what God's doing at Southeast. How you guys are doing over there?
Hey, it's great to be with you. First of all, I got to say that I love that you read the book.
Yeah, man.
I do a few of these, right? And sometimes you're like, I don't think they read the book. So I appreciate you checking it out. So I'm the senior pastor at a church in Louisville, Kentucky called Southeast. And I've been here for like 20 years. I was a church planner before that and then was a teaching pastor here for quite a while and then transitioned into the senior role maybe 4 years ago. And it's been a really crazy ride because we've had the COVID and all of that. But then we've also launched a number of new campuses and kind of getting those going and finding some really positive momentum there. And we just have found that people these days are especially hungry for worship. In fact, we just extended our worship time. We've been like a hard 65 minutes forever. And then just slowly over the last number of months have bumped that out like 3 minutes to now where we're 75 minutes, which for us, I know for, some of the listeners, like that's JV, but for us, 75 minutes is a long time. Yeah. And we just find that people are really hungry for worship. So it's been exciting just to see see that hunger.
Is that mainly extending the music time, or extending your preaching, or where does that 10 minutes come into play?
Well, depends who you ask. But, it is meant to extend the worship experience time, and I might steal a few extra minutes now and then because I subconsciously know it's possible.
Yeah, they probably shouldn't have let you know that they're extending it.
Exactly.
All right, so
my countdown clock hasn't changed, but
right. You just see those red numbers just counting up. You're like, oh, I ain't paying attention to that. All right, so get me into the book. It's called "When Your Way Isn't Working." How did it come about for you? Why did you feel compelled to write it?
Well, I am guessing that some of your listeners know this experience where you have an idea in mind and then you declare it, and then you find out that God is going to take you on a journey to experience that. All right. Like if you're doing a sermon series and, one of the sermons is on patience, a rookie move is to acknowledge that in the title, because then your patience is going to be tested during the course of that week. Yeah. And that's a little bit what happened for me with this book. It's a book that I had wanted to write during the pandemic. I just saw how people were experiencing this disillusionment because a lot of what they put their hope and trust in was no longer working for them. And so I said, okay, I want to write a book about this. And I'm basing it in the final discourse of Jesus, John 14 through 16. And but then almost as soon as I kind of declared that that's the direction it was going to go, I began to experience some of that reality in my own life, and just got on the other side of a lot of the pandemic stuff and found that I was worn out in a way that I wasn't used to. I went away to do some writing, and was going to spend like a week just doing nothing but writing. And usually that's a really highly productive time for me where I don't have a lot of other things. I'm just focused on that. And I came away from that time and I had like 4 pages. It just wasn't working. It's like putting, the bucket down into the well, and every time you pull it up, it just comes up dry. And, your listeners who write music or who write messages and such, how exhausting it is when it doesn't come very easily. Like, it just is a unique form of, from my perspective, this physical, mental, spiritual exhaustion. And so I began to just recognize that I had spent so much time in the last 4 or 5 years focusing on the production side of things, and neglecting some of the connection side of things. And you can only do that for so long. And so the book became more personal for me than I thought it would. There's more of a personal journey, more personal illustrations in there that I had intended or wanted there to be when I initially started the process. Yeah,
that's one thing I really noticed is kind of how vulnerable you were in sharing, therapy, but that some of this was kind of therapeutic for you and stuff like that. So let's kind of walk through a couple of things. So you kind of start in the top of the book of diagnosing disconnection, and this came out of a real struggle for you, as you were mentioning. So tell me how I should diagnose myself. How do I know personally as a ministry leader if my way isn't working? How do I take a diagnostic myself?
Yeah, so I would say that this is not a comprehensive list of symptoms, right? But I really worked hard at trying to identify these things in my own life, but then also to take into account my conversations with and experiences as a pastor in helping our church folks and helping staff navigate this dynamic in their own lives. And I just kind of narrowed it down to these 4 symptoms. If you're going to diagnose, how when your way isn't working. And the 4 symptoms that I talk about in the book are discouragement, frustration, anxiety, and fatigue. And, when those 4 things start to show up and surface in your life, that it's a pretty good indication that something isn't working the way that it should. I think sometimes they come all at once, and certainly, you might experience those four things on a daily basis. But I think it's because to some degree or another, our way doesn't work on a daily basis, right? Right. It might be something significant, but it also could be something quite insignificant. But when those things just begin to identify who you are and they begin to mark your life, so for me, I felt discouraged. I'm not an easily discouraged person. And it didn't last a day or a week. It was just kind of ongoing. And then I started to feel the fatigue side of things, where I was just not very motivated, felt tired and worn out, just kind of getting through it. And then the frustration side of it which is when I knew, okay, I really need to pay attention to some things, because I'm not easily frustrated. And, my wife, I've been married 27 years, and she's like, this is not you. And so when those four things start showing up, I think you need to look at, okay, what is it in my life that needs to be more rightly aligned? And the argument I make in the book is how much of this is a connection issue, meaning that, the kind of key verse I use in this is John 15, verse 5, where Jesus says to his followers, if you remain in me and I remain in you, you'll bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can't do anything. Apart from me, you're going to live in this frustration of, feeling like you're not moving forward. And so I make the argument in the book that it just comes back to being the branch. It comes back to staying connected to Jesus and finding how we can do that in the rhythms of a very busy schedule and busy life.
Do you find as ministry leaders that we struggle asking for help? That I'm the fixer, I'm the helper, I'm the minister. I don't really need to ask for help. So I guess, how do we know when we need help?
Yeah, I think it's not unique to someone who's a minister, but I think it is consistent, meaning that, I talk to some of my friends who are in the medical field, and this is true for them too, right? Like, they are helpers, and so It's hard for them to help. You've heard the expression, the doctors make the worst patients, right? So it's not just, I think it's people who are focused in on that. This isn't in the book, just thought of it, but my wife was having a room in her house painted. I was talking to the painter while he was painting, and I said to him, "Man, I bet your house is awesome. I bet you keep your house painted, all the time, and you don't have to worry about this." And he kind of laughed, and he said, he said that those of us who paint houses have a joke that our houses always need painted the most. In other words, if you're painting all the time, you don't worry about your own house. And I think that is a natural thing that we have to fight against, because the instinct or the intuitive approach is, okay, I'm the helper. If I'm the helper, I don't want to be the person who needs help. And that was something I really struggled with. And I still do. I began to recognize, how many people around me were not only willing to help, they wanted to help, but I needed to let them know I needed it. I needed to ask for it. And then I think one of the mistakes I made, that is, I see in my ministry leader friends as well, is I'm not bad at sharing challenges, struggles with people who I know can do something about it. Mm-hmm. But I'm not very good at just sharing them for the sake of sharing them. Right. And one of the things that God has been teaching me on this journey, is the Galatians truth, to bear one another's burdens, and in so doing, you'll fulfill the law of Christ. That there is something really important about sharing a burden with someone, even if they can do nothing to fix it. Like, that is part of being in the family of God. I think it's easier for church people to do that than for ministry leaders to do that.
I agree. Totally agree.
And then by the time we do it, things are off the rails and are off the tracks. And you're like, man, if I would have just been a follower of Jesus in the church, I probably would have shared this burden or asked for help, earlier in the process, instead of waiting until things got more obviously difficult.
Should that be people outside of the church that you serve? Like, sometimes it's hard for church staff to sit down with another church staff member because my job's on the line or things like that. Where do you find, how to be pastored as a pastor?
Yeah, I mean, personally, there might be some exceptions to this because God may give you a relationship on your staff that's different. But I think as a general rule, it's pretty hard to do it with people on staff with you. Mm-hmm. Again, there could be some exceptions to that, but I know for me, having a few other people who are in my position but not at the church where I serve, that's been a big help. Where mm-hmm. I'll pick up the phone. I did it yesterday. I called a guy in Phoenix who's a senior pastor at a church a lot like ours, and we both just shared some challenging things that we're going through. Neither of us can fix it for the other person, but I think that's important. And in the past, I wouldn't have done that. I would have said, well, it's not like you can do anything about it. But bearing one another's burdens is part of being a follower of Jesus. And we don't need to just do that for others. We need to have others do it for us.
Good. All right. So you have some questions that ministry leaders ask themselves. I thought these were really good. I'm going to read a few of them. Would the people closest say that when they talk to you, you listen well? Is it difficult to fall asleep at night? Do you wake up feeling lethargic? How much time do you spend on some kind of hobby? Are you consistently dropping the ball on simple things like emails and paying bills? If you're a parent, can you tell me the names of your teachers, your child's teachers? That one's hilarious to me. It's like a pop quiz every time I go to my kid's school. What's your kid's what's their homeroom teacher? Deer in the headlights. So that one got me as a parent. Like, hang on, which kid are you talking? Yeah. So what are some of those, kind of self-evaluating questions to ask? What are you hoping ministry leaders will maybe realize about themselves asking these questions?
There are a list of, I don't know, maybe 30 questions that I try to just be more intentional with in my life. I was reading in this idea that the more external input we receive, the less internal reflection we tend to do. Like, there's this correlation, and in the past, opportunities we would have taken perhaps to ask questions like this that are more internal reflection. Now we tend to do more external input, meaning that I'm not in bed at night reflecting on some of these things. I'm scrolling through something on my phone until I get tired, or if I'm in my car, I'm not stopping and reflecting on some of these things. So I think the process of journaling for me has been really important, but some of the questions on there that have been really helpful to me is, one of the questions I have is to keep track of how you spend the first 15 minutes of your day. And I've just found that if I can focus the first 15 minutes of my day on connecting with Jesus, and that is a time for me of prayer. It's a time to think through my day, pray through my day, and connect it to Jesus and connect it to the mission he's given. That helps me a lot. But it's something I have to do intentionally. Otherwise, I'll just kind of get up, get going. And so, the challenge here is for a lot of ministry leaders is to do personally what they are challenging people to do publicly, right? Like, okay, you tell people that how you start your day matters. Does your life reflect that? Or is it just something you say to others, but, despite your good intentions, it doesn't happen. But I think that time for internal reflection and asking questions and having people around you that will tell you the truth. I talk in the book about this process of asking people who are close to me. And it ended up being like probably 16 people that are close to me to just tell me some things in my life that I may have a hard time seeing, some areas that need to be addressed, some help me grow. And I asked them to each come up with 3 things, and I really pushed them. I said, please, I know you, if I were you and I was being asked this question, I would use it to encourage, and I wouldn't actually, you're helping me if you will really do this. And so they did. And I took several hours and just read through all of their responses, and it was incredibly helpful. It was very hard, but it was really helpful. And it made me recognize that I need to make sure and ask for that more often, and for people who are close to me to know that I really want that. I really want it. And I think that helps too.
With kind of this self-evaluation, are there times when I'm going to lie to myself, or could I be lying? Meaning like, everything's great at my church. I don't know everything's great.
Yeah. Yeah. So, this is a deal for me, right? Like I have this positivity problem where, I genuinely think, that's great. I can see the positive in things. And I'll have hard conversations with people, maybe a staff person, maybe a volunteer. And then, my wife will say, hey, how'd that conversation go? And I'll be, it went great. I felt like it went really well. And I'll focus on all the positive things. And what I've learned is that I need to recognize my positivity bias. Like I need to better ask questions and really think through, okay, how are things? And not be afraid when of that answer when it's not quite as positive as I hoped it would. But I think this is often true for leaders. I think that what can make someone a really effective leader is that they, people want to follow someone who's positive and confident and, has a faith approach. They believe in the good and the direction that's going, and all of that's super healthy. But it can also become, a weakness. Like we need to be able to see those things and recognize them.
Good. All right. So let's talk about comparison. This is a kind of a theme that has run through this podcast some because of just kind of the nature of being a ministry leader and looking at the church next door and things like that. So I love that you share that your superpower is choosing the longest line. I have that. I apparently have that power also, but I'll go to the other line or other lane in traffic, and then that lane will get shorter. I have that problem as well, or superpower.
Well, come hang out with me, and I promise you, my superpower is stronger than yours.
So, talk to me about comparison and how how that can really creep up and be a danger.
Yeah, it's harder now than it's been because we're constantly aware of it. And, I'll get on Instagram and see, my friends or other churches watch their reels from Sunday morning. And, it's like, well, I want to go to that church. Mm-hmm. Like it just is always in front of us. And I think learning to celebrate that is part of maturing, meaning that when I was younger in these roles, I felt that a lot more than I do now. Now I really do genuinely celebrate that. I really do feel encouraged when I see those things. That was harder for me when I was younger. But one of the things that I've learned is, when I start to feel that, to go out of my way to try to bless bless whatever God is doing somewhere else, whether that's an encouraging text or leaving a, message online or doing something just to encourage the work of the Spirit in other people in other ways and celebrate. And I find that when I do that, my heart quickly catches up to it. Like I really do celebrate it. But the challenge I think is the focusing in on, the way God is at work right in front of you. So I'll give you an example of this. I went to one of our campuses a couple of weeks ago, and I was visiting 2 or 3 campuses on the same weekend. And it's really easy when you're not normally at one of the campuses to kind of go in and base things on the number and how many people are there and the mix and listening to, the production value. And, you just get caught up in those things. But I went backstage and there was a young lady getting baptized, and I'll call her Sarah. And I went back there, and she was telling me her story, that she'd gone through some pretty difficult things in her marriage, and it started coming to church, even though she didn't grow up in church, and trying to get some answers. And she had 3 kids, had her first child when she was 16. Her mom had her when her mom was 13. And, just had a really challenging time. I mean, and as I prayed for her in the back and listened to her story, like, it just resets. Oh, this is why we do what we do. Mm-hmm. Like, and so the more I can, in whatever position I've been in, the more I can make sure to connect to the one life at a time being impacted, the more it keeps my focus right. Like, I'm not caught up in the comparison game as much. I'm not caught up in the numbers. What stirs my heart, what gets me up in the morning is, are the Sarahs, the people who are, mm-hmm. who are experiencing the transformational power of grace. So, to me, I have on my wall in my office, it says one at a time, and it's covered in pictures and stories of people like Sarah as a way to say, okay, this is where you're focused. This is what you want to celebrate. This is what you want to give your attention to, is one life at a time.
Good. All right. So I got some rapid fire for you before I leave you. You ready?
Let's do it. Okay.
All right. 5 quick hits. Here we go. What is one thing that you've struggled with as a ministry leader that you wish you would have learned earlier?
That when I say it's a busy season, that's a lie that I'm telling myself and the people around me. Like, it's always a busy season. Like, that's not a good reason to put off connection. I'm
glad you mentioned that. We didn't get to that. You really dive into that in the book. I love how you talk about that as a fatigue, warning of fatigue. As we always use that as kind of a crutch of, it's a busy season. Oh, it's Easter, it's Christmas, it's yes. That's good. All right, number 2, where do you go for inspiration?
I go for walks on my farm for inspiration. I've turned it into the rucking thing, but I go for long walks.
Good. This might be the same, but what do you do to relax and unwind? What's your hobby?
Well, I'm a new grandfather, and so my new favorite thing to do to relax is to hang with my grandson.
Good. Congrats, man.
Thank you.
All right. Number 4, what TV show are you binging right now?
I've been watching Prison Break with my 18-year-old.
Yeah. I watched that back in the day. So that came out at the same time as 24. So I'm a big 24 guy. So I probably lean more in the 24 camp. But yeah, Prison Break's good. All right, last one. What is the most attractive trait of a ministry leader?
Humility. And I would increasingly say, the transparency connected to that. Those things go together, but
good. Well, thank you, man. So the book is called When Your Way Isn't Working. It's available now wherever books are sold. Kyle, man, thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate this. Great book. I really appreciate your vulnerable just spirit in it, and the fact that you kind of work through these things on your own and are willing to share so much. So just from one ministry leader to another, thank you for it. I know it's going to help a lot of people.
Hey, grateful. Enjoyed the time.
Hey guys, I'm hanging out with one of our awesome video producers, Ryan McMacken. Ryan, give me your why. Why do you love serving the church through your work? You do a lot of motion graphics, video work for us. Why do you love doing it?
Carl, what I really enjoy the most is being able to serve a broader network of churches than what I can as a staff member. I've been in ministry, I've been on staff at churches for the better part of 20 years. But what's so cool about getting to work at a place like 1230 is that we get to see things, we get to see the church on a global scale. We get to be involved with churches that are all around the country, all around the world. And so getting to see, your work impacting adults, students, children from various countries even is just a blessing. It's such a cool way, I think, to serve the church, and for other churches, especially smaller churches, to be able to have to be able to tap into the resources that previously were really only available to large churches. I think that's what I most enjoy.
Yeah, one thing on that I found really cool as we've been doing it. So we started in 2015. So one thing that I've seen is how the Holy Spirit works with pastors, or plants the same thing in pastors and ministries at the same time. Mm-hmm. That they don't know that church down the road over here, or in this other state, this other country even,
right?
We're all doing Armor of God at the same time, or right. Something like that. We're all doing one book of the Bible or one topic at one time, and it's very interesting to see that as it comes into us, that like, oh, there's another Armor of God. Oh, there's another, right. And no one knows. They haven't started their series yet. No one knows that they're doing it, but it's just interesting to watch the Holy Spirit do that sort of thing too, man. Man, thank you so much for your heart. Really just appreciate your work, appreciate how you serve the team and how you serve the church.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
The show notes for this episode are available now at makingsundayhappen.com.
Hey friends, thanks for hanging out this week. I hope you enjoyed my chat with Kyle. That was really a treat to have him on, and I hope that you learned a lot from him on how to get unstuck if you are hitting a wall when your way isn't working. Be sure to subscribe to our show on YouTube, Spotify, all the things, and you can check out our podcast archive at makingsundayhappen.com. Next week on the show, I'm going to welcome two great guests. Tommy Lozier will be talking about effective training for your audio volunteers. Also, Aaron Blair will be here to discuss planning your building project. All that and more will be next week on the show with both of those great guys. We'll go out there and create some incredible worship experiences at your church this weekend. I'll catch you next week.
Making Sunday Happen is a production of the ministry of 1230 Media. For show notes, archive episodes, and more free resources for your church, visit makingsundayhappen.com.